Well, hi, grade fives. It's great to be with you today, and thank you for letting me join you on your island hopping adventure today. Today, we're going to start just outside of our own town on our little virtual field trip that's going to explore not just some of the amazing islands in the Pacific Ocean, but we're going to look at the Ring of Fire. Now, for those of you who know anything about the Ring of Fire, know that the Ring of Fire is a string of volcanoes and seismic tectonic plates that reach from basically the most southern part of South America all the way north through North America, across the Pacific, down in Japan, and almost reaching all the way down into New Zealand. It's an incredible series of deep ocean trenches that many of the tectonic plates meet at as continents drift over a series of time. Now, you can see from this line here in the darker orange what the Ring of Fire looks like. And we're going to look at some of these islands that are here. And to do that, we're going to take a look here today at our program called Google Earth. Now, Google Earth is an amazing tool, and it's going to help us get to some of the most amazing places. To get out of High Prairie, I mean, we could drive all the way out to Vancouver, but it might be easier for us to fly today. And as we fly down to Vancouver, we might take a ferry across to Vancouver Island. And what a beautiful place Vancouver Island is. And if you ever get an opportunity to travel to Vancouver Island, I'm sure you're going to get to some amazing places like Victoria and possibly the Pacific Rim Park, Tofino, maybe Campbell River, out to Nanaimo, some really beautiful places. Hopefully you'll get a chance to explore this as you go. But as you can see, Vancouver Island sits on what we call a continental shelf, and very close to where this lighter blue meets this darker blue. This tells us, and we can see from the sky, we can see where the continental shelf is meeting the Pacific Ocean. And that, when this land drifts, this causes a lot of friction in the Earth's crust, causing the Earth to shake and quake. And we know those, of course, as earthquakes. As we look a little bit bigger, and science class will help us understand that a little bit more, we can see that light blue travels all the way down the coast of the United States and Mexico into Central America and South America. All really important for us to know. Now, our first step, of course, was Vancouver Island. Our second stop along the way is to follow that same shelf line up through Alaska and the Aleutian Islands, all the way across to Russia, and then down to our friends who live on the island, or the archipelago, better than an island, because it's a series of islands, called Japan. Now, Japan is a very interesting place, very old. The people of Japan, customs can reach back thousands of years. They take their amazing culture that borrows from the Chinese, the Koreans, and even from our Western influences. Now, we're going to zoom in on one of the most important cities in Japan, and one of the most important cities in the world, to be honest with you, and that is Tokyo. And as we get down into the harbor of Tokyo, we can be impressed by the sheer size of this amazing city. The city itself, the population of the city itself is actually the size of Canada. So we shouldn't be complaining too much about it when we come elbow to elbow nowadays with someone. Just imagine you living in the city of Tokyo. We're not going to really spend a lot of time in Tokyo. We're going to look at one of Japan's national treasures, and that is Mount Fuji. And we're going to zoom in here on Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji is an active volcano, and we can find many amazing pictures of our friends who live in Japan, and how sacred this mountain is. And as we kind of look up the mountain from a perspective, we can actually see people climbing up or traveling up the mountain to the top. And if we wanted to, we could probably scroll up to the top of Mount Fuji. And we see this fella sitting over here. We don't have time today to climb the mountain, but we do know that it's a pretty impressive community. So as we zoom out a little bit from our friends here in in Japan, we're going to take a look at another island in the Pacific. And some of you are very familiar with this island because I'm sure some of you may have traveled there for a holiday possibly. And we're going to head over to the Hawaiian Islands. Now, the Hawaiian Islands aren't technically on the Ring of Fire, but they are definitely a part of the volcanic action in the Pacific that creates them. Now, what we're looking at here is the city of Honolulu, just to the north of it, and this is the volcanic tough cone of Diamond Head. And as you can see from the ridge around it, you can see how at one time a volcano was here, but eventually the cone of it blew off and took most of the mountain off with it. An incredible island itself, full of amazing things to see, and I hope someday you might get to see it if you never have. But as we zoom out of Hawaii, we drew past and we can see Pearl Harbor, which some of us have some interest in. We can see a series of other islands to the south where there's other volcanic activity. In particular, thinking of some of those big volcanoes that still are erupting daily, some of these, and creating lava and spilling some molten ash into the earth. And you can see that quite nicely from the air. We have one less stop before we head home, and that is to look at another place that is a little closer to us here in North America, and that is the volcano or the mountain, Mount St. Helens in Washington State, just south of British Columbia. And Mount St. Helens was a volcano that erupted in the early 1980s. And if you ask Mrs. Caudron about it, I'm sure she'll tell you stories about where she was on the day that Mount St. Helens erupted, taking most of the mountain with it. And of course, as you can see how much the mountain has disappeared, blowing most of that mountain cap off. Today, you can actually hike up to the top of the mountain and see it. But just to give you a little bit of perspective about how close that is to us here in High Prairie, how close it is to home, let's just take a look about where we are in perspective to it. So we zoom out, we'll take a little trip, and we fly back into our house, into our home, into our school. Well, I hope you enjoyed just taking a look at some of the islands here in the Ring of Fire. And my challenge to you, and I'm sure Mrs. Caudron, is if you're really interested in these volcanoes and the Ring of Fire, challenge yourself to dive deeper into where they come from and find out a little bit more about them. Anyway, it was a pleasure traveling with you today, and I hope you guys are having a great end of your school year. Take care.